It is great to be in Israel. It's one of my favorite places in the world, so I'm always looking for an excuse to be in Israel. So thank you for providing me an excuse. Thank you, Mira, for inviting me today. I feel a little out of place. I don't have a doctorate degree, so I'm humbled by my peers on the panel and others who have spoken today. What I do have is 36 years of experience keeping the lights on. In the private sector, I worked for Duke Energy for a number of years, and in the private sector, we said we were there to keep the meters spinning. When the meter was spinning, the revenue was coming in. Now, I worked the last several years for the Tennessee Valley Authority. The Tennessee Valley Authority is a government agency, a public power agency, so we had a little different mission. We also managed the river and economic development, so we had a simple mantra. We keep the river flowing, we keep the valley growing, and we keep the lights a-glowing. So that's been my job for some 36 years, to keep the lights glowing. And as an engineer and an operator, when presented with a problem, I like to find a solution. And boy, if you walk away today and don't realize we have a problem before us, then you've been doing something else other than listening today, because certainly the challenges that we've heard throughout the day are formidable indeed. And in fact, sometimes as engineers and particularly as utility executives, we have the tendency to be overwhelmed by problems, to be overwhelmed by challenges, and begin the prioritization process. And instead of handling the challenges as an aggregate, as a whole, we often prioritize. We pick the worst one. Today, it sounds like perhaps having one pipe, fuel diversity. Well, that's a big problem. It is a big problem. But we can't prioritize and say that's the only thing we're going to work on. We have to work on all the problems in aggregate, for sure. So what can we do today as we think about what we've heard so far? One of the biggest things I heard to help solve this problem, I heard in Mira's introduction early this morning, and that was to increase the collaboration, to listen to each other. If we would listen to each other, we could move a long ways down the road. I think if you were to ask if you would ask Peter, Peter would tell you one of the biggest problems in the United States is we're not listening. We talk a lot, but we don't hear what each other has to say. You have the same problem in Israel. So the utility executives who exist to make a profit and to serve electricity to their customers at a reasonable cost have a different mindset than scientists, who have a different mindset than university professors, that have a different mindset from people in the government. And we have a problem listening to each other. So the first solution to the problem is to begin to listen and to actually move beyond the paradigm that this is not going to happen here, or that this is a 5% chance and I'll take my risk on a 5% chance, or even a 12% chance, as we heard earlier today. So if we're listening to each other, what might we expect when we're solving problems? And as I listened today, I heard really two categories of solutions. We've talked about those already. The first was prevention or protection is one category, and the second is recovery. We balanced what we spend in prevention and in recovery. And the combination of those two things provides for us resiliency, the ability to bounce back quickly. And we need both in order to bounce back quickly. In the protection area, it's pretty simple. For physical security, it's about barriers. We create barriers for all kinds of physical security challenges. We create walls for outside substations, fences outside substations. We even have bulletproof curtains now to hang in front of large transformers. There's also the opportunity to have military action take place proactively ahead of threats that are forecasted. That's prevention. That's protection against physical security. Cybersecurity is not really much different. We create barriers in the cybersecurity space. We just happen to create those barriers in software or in other kinds of separation systems. We even can authorize military action in cybersecurity cases where we know of proactive threats. But what do we do in a combined attack? We have a tendency, at least in my country, and I suspect in yours, to say that's the military's problem, or that's the government's problem. The government is to protect us against a nuclear strike. But then we ignore our contribution to that. And let me give you a simple example. For many, many years now, I've been fighting copper theft in substations. Copper theft is a big issue in the United States because there's a high market for copper metals in a secondary market. So we have people who come in at night, break into our substations, cut all the grounds from the transformers, throw it in the truck, haul it off, and sell it for scrap metal. Well, the substation doesn't work very well without any grounds in it. So we have that problem all over the states. And I have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in solving that problem, putting cameras in that are infrared cameras so you can see at night, lighting the substations and putting regular cameras in, putting up walls, putting up fences. We find that people drive their pickup trucks right through those fences. They're not worried about that. They don't even worry about getting their picture taken. Many of them look and smile at the camera, and they've made themselves up some way, which makes it difficult to find them. But you know what we found to be the best solution? We put a sign on the fence that said, "Beware, bad dog." And inside the fence, we had a very cheap, simple, motion-activated recording of a barking dog. It cost about $50 a substation. Is there a $50 challenge out there for EMP, for example? If we are to protect against EMP, we shield our critical infrastructure, for example. We place Faraday shields around control systems. We use shielded cable for substations. When we've done that, we take away the impetus for the threat, or at least we move it to our neighbor. In the U.S., there's a lot of interest in that because as one utility does something, it forces the next door utility to do so. And as that moves on through the country, and we find that we've got a reason and an impetus for moving forward in that respect. There's also a lot of research in the protection scheme. In fact, I had the opportunity last week. I was touring a nuclear research plant in a university, and I happened to ride to the event with a man who created the Cree company in the United States. The Cree company manufactures LED light bulbs. And he was sharing with me that they are currently investing a lot of money and time and energy into silicon carbide as a basis for electronics. And in his way of speaking, silicon carbide is very, very resilient to EMP, and if we can find a way to build electronic circuits using silicon carbide as a base, then we have an EMP-resistant circuit that would not require shielding. That's interesting. I'd like to invest more money and more time and more energy into understanding that, and I think that's a big part of protection. But what about recovery? We've heard all day about redundancy, and it is my belief that what redundancy does is provide choices to smart people. Because in the end, recovery is really about the human factor. It's about the decisions that are made by real people, many of whom have come and spoke to us today. But real people in times of crisis make decisions. They do that using two pieces of information. One is the information system availability, system visualization. What is out there? What information do I have about the current situation? We heard more about that just before lunch today. In order to make a good decision, you need information. But you also need choices. If you don't have choices, it's very, very difficult to make a decision. You can have all the information in the world, but without choices, you can't do anything about it. Redundancy provides choices. So where do we get redundancy? Well, a couple of places. One is the subject of this next few minutes, and that's the aggregation of renewable energy. You have one pipe. You have moving towards 100% gas, non-fuel diverse source. Renewable energy provides you an alternative to that source. But you also heard just a few minutes ago how complex our grid is and how difficult it is. It's the only business I know of where we make the product and we consume it at exactly the same time. It's transported at the speed of light from the production center to the user. That's the only place I know that that happens. It's very complex to manage this. We cannot throw renewable energy onto the grid without aggregating that, without integrating that, and that requires digital controls. It requires smart grid technology. It means that we want to provide a choice to a smart human being when faced with a recovery option. And one of those choices might be to move to the renewable energy source and reverse that back into the grid. But in order to do so, we need information and we need that choice. Another source of choice is infrastructure investment. We've heard a lot of different things about infrastructure investment today. I'm really talking about steel and mortar in the ground infrastructure. The interconnections that were discussed first thing this morning by the chairman of IEC, those kinds of interconnection provide real choices in recovery situations. Even if you lost all of your generation, if you had adequate interconnections with other countries, you've got the opportunity to bring the grid back up. Those are real choices, but they require money, they require investment in infrastructure. The same thing is true of transmission. You should have north to south routes, multiple north to south routes. You should have east to west routes, multiple east to west routes, and be able to move energy across different and multiple sources of that. So strategically placed, carefully determined routes are important. And finally, investment in technology is also important. We need to be smarter about what's happening on our systems here today. We can't make decisions without information and choices. We need that information, and that comes largely from technology investment. This will require a full-on effort. We have to balance that investment in prevention and balance that effort in recovery so that we produce the best outcome. But above all, we need to listen to each other. And thank you very much.